Final Fantasy X is a game which I'm really looking forward to discussing. It is my favourite video game of all time and in my opinion, a true masterpiece. Now before I begin, I must say that there will be spoilers in this video, so if you have not played this now 18-year-old game, I recommend that you do before you watch the video. Also, as it is the most recent version of the game, I will be focusing on only the HD Remaster edition for this review. Now I'm going to start with talking about the story and the characters, and the story of this game kicks into high gear straight away as you're introduced to the protagonist Tidus, or Tidus, whatever you want to call him. Just for note, I call him Tidus, so deal with it, okay? We are soon thrown into a series of cutscenes which show a mysterious space whale called Sin interrupting Tidus' Blitzball game and destroying the technologically advanced city of Zanarkand. As a result of this attack, Tidus as well as his friend Aura are transported to a seemingly new role called Spira. Now, it is from this point on where I feel like the story is structured very well. Having Tidus there as a type of surrogate character really is fantastic, as we get information on this new world from the likes of Riku and Waka, just as he does. Once you reach Besaid Village and meet Yuna, Lulu, Kimahri, the plan of completing a pilgrimage to obtain a final Aeon and defeat Sin is set in motion. From here, the story sprinkles in consistent appearances from Sin to show us what we are up against, as well as introducing the Maesters of Yevon, who, for all intents and purposes, decide the law of the land. My favourite aspect of the entire game is the atmosphere of the whole setting of Spira. The Spiral of Death is so dark, and yet the people of Spira seem resigned to this fate and believe that the teachings of Yevon is the best they can hope for. Something that is still terrible is the best that they can hope for, even if it means that a summoner must die just for them to get a temporary respite. And it is that kind of resignation that is ever present in the setting which just sets it on another level for me in terms of just the sheer darkness of the setting and how interesting it is as an outsider looking in to play. Speaking of a sacrifice, that was the first thing that was ever written for the story of this game, and you can tell as the whole story revolves around it. Tidus finding out the truth is a real turning point for the game, as he refuses to let Yuna die, which ultimately leads to real change for the world. The scenes before the Yuna-Leska fight are the culmination of the whole journey and, in my opinion, are the best in the game. The way in which Auron's backstory is told is genius. He hates himself for his failure to stop the cycle and the needless death of his friends, and you really see the emotion pour out of him in his lines.
Now! This is it! Now is the time to choose. Die and be free of pain, or live and fight your sorrow. Now is the time to shape your stories. Your fate is in your hands!
Yuna and the gang throwing away false hope is some powerful stuff, and it really makes it all the more satisfying when, in the end, they are able to save Spira from Sin and New Yevon's whole cycle. I don't want to say too much about the ending, but it is a classic, and the way in which Auron and Tidus say their goodbyes is just so well done. It is a bittersweet ending, but to be honest, I think it works well for the tone of the game. I wouldn't have preferred something more light-hearted because the story, which was so good and so dark, I think it did need an ending like this, which sets the board clean and really does set the stage well for a sequel, which obviously we end up getting in Final Fantasy X too, but I'm not going to talk about that game in this video. Now, we move on to the gameplay side of things, and the first thing to note is a new turn-based battle system. This was a new step for the Final Fantasy series, and it is one that I think was implemented really well. When combined with the brilliant party interchange system, it allows for you to strategize in combat to an extent that was not possible in previous titles. Then you have the spear grid, which, although can become grindy late game, is still an engaging and interactive way to manage your skills. In the standard grid, your path is fairly linear, with each character having their own set class from the start. However, if you choose the expert grid, you have total freedom about what you want to do right from the beginning. And I personally was really appreciative of being given that choice. The equipment setup here is relatively simple early on, but once you gain access to customization with Riku, a whole new world of potential opens up to you. You're right, you really cannot live without Riku in this game, believe me. Passive abilities range from status protection, status infliction, and permanent buff statuses like haste and protect, which are vital for the hardest enemies. With all this taken into account, there is no shortage of fun fights and bosses to take on in this game. The optional content in particular has many fun challenges such as the Monster Arena, a Mega Dungeon, and the Dark Aeons and Penance fights in the International and HD versions. Now, it is only fair that I touch on some things that I'm more mixed on. Story-wise, there's actually very little about this game that I dislike, but the whole Vio Purifico section, where you're captured by puny guards who you already beat and are thrown into a dungeon with an exit, is just silly to say the least. Also, I think the whole Dreams Anakin and the whole Dream the Faith situation could have been explained a bit better in-game, rather than having to rely on the Ultimania. From a purely gameplay perspective, there are a few things which genuinely annoyed me. For a start, it is criminal that we're still unable to skip the goddamn cutscenes, even in the newest version of the game. There's simply no excuse for that. The second major thing I disliked were the tedious mini-games. The Chocobo race and lightning dodges in particular are bad, and they seem to be more luck-based than skill-based. Some people criticise the voice acting and the linear nature of this game, and even though I can see why, I personally never found it to be that much of an issue.
I wanted to see Yuna's statue too, but I wanted to see it with Yuna by my side.
There are a few sped up lines of course which are down to localization problems, but overall I feel the voice work, especially for the time, was solid. As for the story being linear, I think that the structure of the plot is almost required to be told in that way. After all, it is a pilgrimage which, by nature, requires the cast to go through a set route in the quickest time possible. That's how it would work in real life, so I think it translates well to the story. Overall, when all said and done, I just give this game a 10 out of 10, man. Sure, it's not perfect, but nothing is, especially not video games. And there is enough great stuff here, between the story and the gameplay, to warrant this great rating. Anyway, enough of me gushing about this game. I'd be curious to hear if any one of you has any thoughts about this game or my take on it. Did you agree? Did you disagree? Well, if so, either way, please leave a comment. I'd be glad to hear from you. Take care, everyone.